how closely designed were these rotations? Because like I've played every class now, and there are some classes where like the warrior has a really incredible class design. Like they have a
Mhm.
bit of everything. And then you go into the jack of all trades classes like druids, where they have a bit of everything, but the rotation's a little more simplistic and different. Was that all by design, or was there like was there an element of nuance when you were building this stuff that it would just kind of happen that way, and then that became the expected behavior for that class?
In vanilla, there was, I think, no attempt to make rotations. It was just kind of, hey, here's some cool abilities. Players will figure it out. Um, and by the time, like when I joined around Burning Crusade, we were intentionally designing rotations. So like, this is what we intend. Art of War procs and resets this cooldown for the paladin. Um, that was all intentional. There was also a mindset of it's okay to have some classes that are more complicated. Combat rogues at the time, it's probably changed since then. Affliction warlocks, shadow priests are still like, it's okay for that rotation to be complicated. Players will kind of know that and opt into it. But then we also have to make sure there's some pretty simple things out there for players who don't want that, who just want to like kind of come in and have fun. Hunters were often in that category of, you could probably get by with 4 buttons. And let's not deviate too far from that. There was an interesting phenomenon that often happened where we would try to come with interesting set bonuses for the tier sets that generally came out of dungeons and raids. And sometimes we hit upon something that was so cool, players didn't want to give it up. Like, you know, oh, it feels so good when this one ability resets this other ability, and it's going to be sad when I have to retire this tier set. And so sometimes we would just end up baking that into the talent trees for the next expansion so that they like wouldn't, we'd stumbled into a really fun rotation and didn't want to have to pull it away.
What was it like joining TVC and kind of experiencing that upwards momentum of growth with the game itself? Because there was a rapid I mean, I started really playing and getting hooked to the game in TVC. But what was it like growing the player base? And I think on top of that, balancing between World of Warcraft getting all these new players coming in, and then also having the existing player base and trying to strike that balance as you're kind of building expansion by expansion.
Oh yeah, gosh, there's a lot to talk about there. Like Age of Empires had a really big audience, but they didn't have the passion. They didn't live the game the way WoW players did. I mean, for a long time, and maybe it still is. I haven't gone in several years, but BlizzCon was for World of Warcraft. Like that, it was like guilds coming together to
Yeah.
meet in real life and things like that. So that phenomenon of a community, like a very engaged, very passionate community, the cosplayers, the meetups, like I had not experienced that before. And then the other thing you talk about with the having to serve both the players that have been playing for years and then the new players manifested in a couple ways. One was originally the idea was that to get to the next content, you had to finish the previous content. So you wouldn't be able to go into Naxxramas until you had finished Blackwing Lair and Molten Core. And that just meant the percentage of players who saw that content, got smaller and smaller and smaller because it was, hundreds of hours to get to that point. And we didn't want a new expansion to come out and then new players would have to go do the previous expansion. Like, hey, everyone's talking about Legion has just launched, but you, new player, you can't play Legion. You have to go to level 1 and go back to the content that's probably actually older, worse art, hasn't aged as well, doesn't have like the best designers on it, and then finally get to a point where now you can catch up to your friends and do the new stuff. And gradually over time, we just said, look, instant catch up. If you buy the expansion, you get to pretty much play the expansion right away. You don't have to go like do all the old stuff first to catch up. But it's a double-edged sword because then for the dedicated players that have done all of that, it kind of cheapens their accomplishment,
That's what I think is so tricky about MMORPGs. You don't want to cheapen the journey of people that have put in the time, the hours, and the development of expertise to get to where they are.
Yeah.
And then, and I speak to this as a player. Like I think it's. I remember when I was a kid at the time, I found that so confusing. I'm like, why would you boost all the way to 70? Like that just feels like this world feels real. It feels legitimate. It feels like
Yeah.
an actual society where for me to get from point A to point B or from 0 to 60 or 70, I have to put in the time and the effort and really go for it. And just for people to just jump straight to that, I remember that was one of the first instances where I thought, "Okay, that strikes me as weird. This wasn't what I expected, intuitively from an MMO philosophy."
Yeah, yeah. I'm friends with Izzy Cartwright, who is a really, really smart game designer, worked on the Guild Wars games. And he said there's really only one question in MMO design, and that is how many hours do you want players to spend? And what he was getting at was, is this a 1,000-hour game? If so, it's going to be really hard to onboard new players. Is it a 20-hour game? If so, players are going to kind of hit the end and run out of stuff to do. And it's really hard to design a system that feeds both ends. You're usually just choosing one and hoping the other doesn't feel too ignored.